And it's important to say that because I think the only reason I was able to come out of it was I had a supportive system around me and I had a grit. And I think this grit I have is one of my best friends. She's always reminding me that no matter what it is you've dealt with or that comes your way, she's like, hey, I'm still here. So that inner grit is one of my best friends. She is fierce. I don't know how I need to give her a name. And she's a quiet grit. But she's always telling me, your issues are not going to defeat you. The way people talk about you is not going to diminish you. You are still you. And that has carried me till today. That grit. We'll name her after this when we've had several cocktails. So did radio, went to university in South Africa, then Malaysia, then came back. And I was so sure I was going to go back to radio. I loved it. It's still kind of my first love. But the radio station at the time was going through a lot of transition. And so Eve D'Souza, who's again another radio veteran and a good friend of mine, and she's also from Mombasa, she said to me, have you ever thought of TV? I was like, no, not really. She's like, look, if I were you, I&M building is just there because we're at Lonro House. She's like, look, just go and see whether they have an opening. And then I remembered how my dad said, you got to pay the bills, just pay those bills, girl. So I started just looking for work. I didn't know anyone. That grit, again, was like, let's go to I&M. So I went, and I went to 14th floor at I&M. That's where KTN was. I knew no one. All I had was a screen test, sort of, because of a project I did for a friend of mine when I was pretending to be a presenter on his project. And for some reason, he gave it to me, and for some reason, I had it, and I thought, maybe this will help. I don't know. So I go and I ask the ladies at the reception, if I want to do something on TV, who do I talk to? And they were quiet at first. They were like, Saudi Nani, like, who is this chick? And then I actually said, I'm willing to start anywhere. I'm even willing to start by serving tea. And I meant it. I was like, I just want to get my foot in because I don't know. It's Beatrice Marshall and Joroge Mwaura and all these people. I know we're not in the same WhatsApp group, but I'm saying I can serve them tea, is what I'm saying. And they said later, that really surprised them. It threw them off. And they said, you know what, there's a producer who's been looking for a travel show presenter, and he's been doing auditions. You sit down, let's call him and see whether there's anything. And he was called Gabriel. He's late, unfortunately, but he basically is the reason I entered TV. And long story short, I auditioned and I started a travel show. No training, nothing. He was like, we're starting in 5 days. I was like, what do you mean we're starting in 5 days? I've never been in front of a camera. He's like, you'll be fine. You just stand there and talk. And so we went to, our first trip was in Kikope. And there was an outbreak of people getting sick from goat meat. I don't know if anyone remembers that story. And this guy says, go stand there and eat that goat meat and tell Kenyans it's fine. And that was my first rodeo, my first ever piece to camera. And I'm shaking, he's just like, relax. I'm like, but the goat meat is like, smile. The goat meat is fine. And I was like, hi. And that was my training. Baptism by fire, which I feel like is a lot of places in Kenya, right? Hey, Kenya. If you can make it here, you're good. Can make it anywhere. Did Out and About for 6 months. I'm sorry for some of you who might know this story. That's why I'm trying to just like rush through it. And then in the 5th month, as the contract was ending with the travel company that was sponsoring it, the newsroom started speaking to me. And by the newsroom, I mean people like Beatrice. It was very intimidating because I was pretty young. I was in my early 20s. And they said, you should consider being a reporter. I was like, there's no way. Then Joroge Mwaura comes and says, have you considered? I'm like, there's no way. And the thing is, I thought I was too young to be an anchor because the anchors we had then didn't look like me. I mean, Lillian Muli was there and she was, I guess, introducing the phase of maybe younger anchors. Long story short, Farida Karone, who had left and then joined KTN, called me when I was in the middle of Old Town in Mombasa looking for Lessos. True story. I love Lessos, I love Old Town. She called, she's like, where are you? I said, do you want to know specifically or generally? I'm in Mombasa, I'm in Old Town. She's like, yeah, you need to come. You need to screen test. The grit again, because there was a lot of imposter syndrome. I'm like, there's no way I can. And you remember the opening for news was Mtukufu Rais. Who can finish that sentence? Angela is like, well, it was anyway, there was a certain way that the news was presented and I just didn't think I fit the bill. So she spent a lot of time workshopping me out of my imposter syndrome. And she said, I wouldn't have looked for you if I didn't think you had it in you. She saw more in me than I saw in myself. And to date, she's still a friend and mentor. And long story short, baptism by fire. After a week, I was thrown onto the 11 o'clock news. And after 4 days, I was thrown onto lunchtime news. I'm still in my early 20s. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but this grit is just saying, just go. You got this. And that's just basically how my TV career started. I did 1 o'clock, then weekend prime, then prime time was huge in 2009. And Esther Runga was with us at the time. It was a nice time. It was a nice time to be in the newsroom. I think they were really trying to encourage a lot of young journalists. Larry Madowo was in the newsroom at that time as well. All kind of starting. It was just a nice space to be in. And there was a lot of support and a lot of pushing for younger faces. Then I got the call to do South Africa, so I moved to do ETV in Johannesburg and lived there for 2 years, and then came back because I wanted to be here for the elections. I remember saying I want to be there for the 2013 elections. I just remember that. So came and joined Citizen, and I think Citizen is kind of what changed my life, and I think a lot of our lives. I joined Hussein, and I don't know, I had some of the best 6 years of my life doing that. And that is what introduced me to why we're here today. In 2013, I used to host a show called Monday Special. Every Monday, it was a social issues program, and we would speak on issues, everything from domestic violence to diabetes. It was such a wide range of topics. And then one day, Farida, at the time, she's the COO of Citizen TV, and she says, we need to talk about how period poverty is holding so many girls from going to school. And the entire newsroom, majority men, were like, you want to talk about what? Where? And there was actually a lot of backlash. They're like, you can't talk about periods on TV, except she was the COO. She's like, so I'm the COO, and I'm saying we're going to talk about periods, but it wasn't easy. There was actually a lot of back and forth, a lot of discomfort. But the way that story was done, I think, changed the way the conversation is, approached. And I think even Alfred will say Periods of Shame was like a shifter. It showed 2 girls in Marigat in Baringo County, and they were showing all the products they use because they don't have pads. They showed chicken feathers, they showed soil, and they showed goat hide. And the goat hide was for those who are lucky because they share it with an older neighbor. I just remember everyone collectively being completely shell-shocked. I think for a lot of people, they had never interacted full face with period poverty. A lot of us would just, in fact, when we were having a conversation with Dr. the other day with Dr. Claire, we were talking about how you go into the store and you have so much choice and privilege that you're even like, which color looks nice for a product? Which one smells nice? Which one fits nicely? And these are people who have never interacted with a sanitary pad before. I was shocked, and so was everyone else. So were Kenyans. It trended for 2 days with a lot of, how is it 2013? Where is the government? Where is the budgetary allocation? And that story, I believe, shifted the way we approach menstrual justice in Kenya. And this is why the power of storytelling is everything. Because suddenly, budgetary allocation conversations came up in Parliament. Because again, it's putting shame, right, to the people who are supposed to do something. It was doubled that the following year. The menstrual health policy started being designed. It was launched in 2020. A lot of the organizations that we see today started at that time. So it changed the way menstrual justice was approached in this country. And that's the power of mainstreaming something taboo. That's the power of having the conversation and being bold enough to be like, we're going to have this conversation because people's lives depend on it. And that's how I started Inua Dada. It started with, because I can't explain how bothered I was by it. Literally staying up at night just thinking. And the reason it was a big story is because these girls were saying, we're not going to school on those days. Some of our peers are falling pregnant because they don't have information around their bodily rights. So, and it was around 2 million girls at the time, I think, who were missing out. So it was more than just menstrual health. It was human rights violations. It was gender-based violence. It was teen pregnancy. It was ignorance. They were also saying around this time, we believe we're dirty. So some of us just hide in a room for a few days and we don't come out until our period is over. Some of us are told not to come near the family when we're on our period. So it was all these layers that a lot of us hadn't really interacted with. And in Wadada, we coined that to say uplift. It started as something small. It was just supposed to be a conversation. But then the former First Lady got involved and it became this big thing. And we launched it we went back to Marigat. We were able to take pads for thousands of girls. But there's an image that didn't leave me. One of the girls kept looking at the packet like she'd never seen. And I thought to myself, okay, then who's going to do the education of how to wear a pad and how to dispose of it? And then that's how I registered the foundation. The idea was to talk about the topic, like to mainstream it and to provide access to sanitary towels. And for the most part, we've done that for the last few years. Advocacy has always been my heart and soul. Advocacy is basically drawing attention to an issue. I did not know all these fancy terms like advocacy. I was introduced to them when people introduced me to certain rooms and said, come and talk about your advocacy. I'm like, I don't know what you're saying, but okay. But I have now learned to use it proudly. And I think everyone in this room is somehow an advocate. If you don't think so, I'm here to tell you you are. It's in the closet. It's coming out in some of you. And so talking about it also came with its own issues. I think I've always been vocal. I believe I was raised in an environment that allowed me to come as I am, but to just respect people, respect myself, respect boundaries, but to never feel diminished, even when I was being called frog voice, even when I was such a tomboy. I grew up with an older sister. She's 6 years older, so she was never really at home with me. When I was in primary finishing, she was in high school at Kenya High in boarding. So I was left with my twin brother and my older brother, and they were like, you are our fellow brother. I was just completely awkward and finding my identity, but my parents never made me feel weird about it. And so even when I was pregnant with Huru in 2015, I was body shamed a lot. Like messages would come in constantly saying things like, please get off our screens. You shouldn't be pregnant and reading news. Please, oh yeah, please leave, you're too pregnant.
Did you get their names, their numbers?
I wish, screenshot. Did we have screenshot at that time? I don't know. But usually with hate, I'm like, it's fine, you need a hug, you're having a bad day. For this one, I fought back so hard because I just felt like it was such an affront to women. It wasn't about me. Also, I'd be like, you've literally insulted women. You've insulted, and a lot of it was actually men, you know? And it was very hateful, but I pushed back, wore tighter dresses, really tight.
Yes, girl.
Oh, no, I did.
I love it.
And I'd sit on the side to be like, look at my growing bump. Get you hate me now. But I'd get a lot of messages from women saying, thank you. Because people are facing it in their offices, body shaming. People are facing menstrual shaming. So the reason I'm using that context is I've always felt it important to talk about these issues because it's really not about me. It's about the millions of people who are pushed back against. So years later, we have a center in Kariobangi. We partnered with the Pad Project and we train women how to make sanitary pads. And we literally just launched in Kakamega as well with the Western Kenya Sanitation Project to do the same thing, but to add an element of sanitation. And we were working closely with other counties like Kilifi and Embu. So it's the greatest joy is seeing the lives that continue to be impacted, even by a lot of you in this room, by the way. You're all heroes, all of you who are in the space, And the other amazing thing is the stories that I've heard throughout my time in this advocacy space in different parts of the world. And being able to share our stories because it's important that we tell our own stories. I did a book called My First Time, launched it just before COVID. So COVID,
I want you to share what inspired My First Time. Like, why did you choose to use the book as a form of a different angle to advocacy, right?
Yeah, I think I wanted people to I wanted especially girls to see themselves in these stories. So I tried to pick a diverse group of people in the book, about 65 of them. And there was everyone from, we don't think about a woman who is visually impaired and she's menstruating. We don't think about somebody who has been in prison when they're on their period. We don't think about people living who are differently abled, or people who are athletes, or people who travel. Or people who have different abilities like Down syndrome and autism. So those stories are in the book because everyone, and interacts with the period, but the experiences are so varied and some of them are really painful. There was also a lot of celebration in the book. I didn't want it to be all doom and gloom, but the majority of it was, man, we don't really think about the women in prison. We don't really think about the women who have maybe a physical disability, who have since told me that it's easier for them to have the, the pad, which is an underwear. Otherwise, it can tend to get loose or fall. We don't think about the woman who can't see. So what about having instructions in Braille? There's so many things when we talk about menstrual justice and that's what I wanted to achieve. And there's also men I featured in the book, about 8 men, to also bring that voice because, number one, a lot of the stigma, it is perpetuated by women as well, but largely by men. And to have them and their voices as allies in the book. So I had a pastor, an imam, a rapper, just diverse voices to say, number one, we're with you. And number two, the people who diminish women and girls menstruating, those are not men. Like real men support women. And so it was good to have that voice. So the book we were about to do a tour. We started in Eldoret, we did a signing, then we were going to Mombasa, then COVID hit. So I'm hoping to do something with that soon. Yeah, but that's why. And the idea is that it goes into many libraries. So we're going to do a library drive soon. It's already in some libraries. Well, we also presented it to the former First Lady. So it's in the State House Resource Center, which is amazing. And so the idea is, and I love seeing the girls flip through the books. I have little clips of them because they're like, I can see myself. A lot of people can see themselves in the different faces in that book to tell themselves, I'm okay. Like there's nothing wrong with me. As opposed to, and also, being told you're suddenly a woman. What does that mean? Being told, don't let boys touch you. What does that mean? It's confusing. So the stories are just this is what happened my first time. This is what I wish I knew. And this is what I'd like young girls to know. Yeah, so it's kind of like a big sister.